Good afternoon, all. Welcome to FINE's third forum since the COVID-19 issue has sort of come upon us. Welcome back to many of you who have been on some of the other discussions, and hello to those who are joining for the first time. I'm Peter Allison, I'm FINE's director, and I'm joined today by others on the FINE team, Sarah Lyman, Dana Stevens, Tanya Taranovsky, and Hannah Layton. Today, we really hope to just, in many ways, continue the conversation that we've had over the previous two forums and hear your updated needs in learning, success stories, and solutions where you're seeing them. We've also decided to line up a few people at the beginning to share some thoughts and stories and strategies that we think will help seed the conversation. So Hannah from our staff is going to start by talking a little bit about what we've been hearing in a systems map that we've put together to help guide the conversation moving forward. And then we're really pleased that we'll have Jacob Benson from the Hanover Food Co-op Food Stores of New Hampshire and Vermont. He's the merchandising director. He's going to talk a little bit about, from a retailer perspective, some of the issues involved in becoming a vendor for a retailer and some of the things that they're doing given COVID-19 to adjust and adapt. And so we'll have an opportunity to hear from him and then provide some time for questions. And then Hillary Wallentuck from the New England Food and Dairy Council is going to give us a bit of an update on some of the issues directly facing the dairy industry right now, challenges and opportunity for us to talk with her. After that, we're really open to hearing from each of you, any of you around your concerns and issues. Just by way of housekeeping, feel free to use the chat to actually sign in and tell us your name and organization where you're calling in or zooming in from. Feel free to, if you need to adjust your name on your computer, you can do that by clicking on the three dots on the upper right-hand side of your screen. You'll see there's an option there for renaming. We have everyone pretty much on mute, but if you have something to say, unmute yourself. And if you would like to ask a question, you can either raise your hand or put that in the chat. We'll also be providing some time for folks to jump in. I think that's about it. We are recording this session. We are also taking notes and recording the chat, which we'll make available on our website at the end of the session. So with that, let me actually turn it over to Hannah, who's going to share a little bit about some of the resources that we've been offering and how that's led to an idea of systems mapping to help frame the conversation moving forward. So thanks, Hannah.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm actually going to share my screen. Can you see this page, this resource page? Great. I just wanted to walk everybody through a few of the resources that we've been managing over the last few weeks, and for many of you this will be a review, but I'll put the link to our COVID-19 resource page in the Slack, in the chat box, and if you go to this link you'll find all of our information on forums, how to get more information, recordings and notes from the last forums. You'll see resources on institutional food systems and COVID-19 organized by topic. We are collecting resources that are put into the chat box during the forums and aggregating them in here, so please do feel free to share your resources that you want to be communicated out. And then you'll also see here in the middle our matchmaking spreadsheet, which is a tool that we've shared on the last couple of forums and had conversations with a handful of you about separately, which looks like this. And it's organized into several tabs of food, trucking, labor, storage, TA, and then a miscellaneous tab. And this is really designed to help do some matchmaking around surplus and need in all of these categories. You can see that food is the tab with the most listings. And right now there's a lot of surplus here. So we are putting this out into the public, and we encourage anybody to create a listing and make sure that you're checking back. And for those that are managing entities that may have surplus of any of these goods or a need, we also encourage you to help facilitate those connections. And that's what I actually want to talk a little bit more about today. So what we're finding with the spreadsheet is that we have a lot of listings, and we're wondering if folks are coming in and adding and not necessarily coming to check back, or if there's more opportunity to make these connections or to help make these connections. And so in order to do that, we want to better understand who is overseeing the entities and organizations and agencies that have a surplus. Specifically, we're thinking about food in this context, and then who is managing those that have the need for food right now and may not be able to get it. And so in order to better understand that, we wanted to take a look at our farm to institution supply chain as it looks normally, and then think about kind of what our new supply chain looks like now that the farm to institution channels have been pretty disrupted. And so this is a fairly simplified look at what we think of as the farm to institution network. So we have a supply side that feeds into the middle of the supply chain, and then into institutions with a number of entities that support on either side of the supply chain and then all along it. And obviously right now, what we're seeing is that, oops, one second, please. I'm just gonna share it like this. What we're seeing now is that there's this disruption at all points of the supply chain, where institutions closing is creating a significant reduction in the amount of local food that's being delivered to institutions, though some still is. And then of course, between farms in the middle of the supply chain, there's a significant reduction in the amount of food being purchased as well. And so we wanted to better understand how that food is being redirected at each of those points. And so you can see, if we start at the beginning of the supply chain, a portion of the food is still going through distribution and then on to institutions, but a lot of the food that was being sent to institutions is being redirected either before it even gets to distributors and food hubs and processors, or at that middle of the supply chain level. And what we're seeing is that it's either, from our conversations with all of you and with other partners, that the sort of three primary buckets where that food is being redirected are either it's going direct to consumer, to retail outlets, or to food banks and pantries, or it's being wasted at some point of the supply chain. And then meanwhile, at the other end, for institutions, we really want to understand where that quarter of the population that was previously accessing food from institutions, where they're currently getting their food, so that we can, even though the farm to institution supply chain has been disrupted, the pieces are still there, and we want to make sure that those that were relying on institutions for markets and those that were relying on institutions to eat are still being connected, and we want to support those connections. And so we've had a few conversations with folks in the hunger relief and food rescue space, as well as retail and direct to consumer. And we want to be partnering with you to sort of use this spreadsheet as a jumping off point to make sure that if growers and producers have a surplus, that it's getting put in here, and that if you're representing organizations that are looking for food, that we're connecting you with this list. So I'm going to pause there, and I know that we have time for conversation, but I would just ask, ahead of that discussion, that you sort of think about, are these the primary markets in your experience that food that was meant to be going to institutions are being redirected towards? And are you seeing examples in your community of other markets, and also any kind of coalition building around these sorts of efforts? So we're starting to see that a lot of organizations are coming together that might not have traditionally worked side by side to connect this fragmented supply chain. And we are interested in making sure that we're supporting those kinds of coalitions, which means that we want to know where the most coordination is needed. So I think we'll have time to talk about that later, but I'll leave it there for now.
Hannah, thanks a lot. That was a great framing for the conversation today, building on a lot of the issues that we've been hearing about, and I'm sure all of you have been hearing about in the recent weeks. And as Hannah said, we're really interested in diving into some of those questions when we get to the general conversation time. At this point, I'd love to introduce Jacob Benson, who's the Director of Merchandising for the Hanover Co-op Food Stores of New Hampshire and Vermont. Really pleased to have Jacob here on actually very short notice through assistance of Alan Reitz, the Marketing Director, who's a longtime colleague and friend. The co-op is, it's actually the second largest food co-op in the country and the oldest. And as such, I think they have a really unique perspective as both sort of a big retailer, but also very much of a mission-aligned entity with many of us on the phone in terms of supporting the local food system. And really interested to hear from Jacob about sort of the process in general for establishing new vendor relationships with the co-op, and in particular, anything that's changed given the recent disruption to the institutional supply chain that Hannah just referenced. So Jacob, I just want to welcome you and ask if you'd give us a little bit of a sense of what it takes to become a vendor and how that has changed in the recent past. I know you may be on mute. Let's see.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to share a screen. This is from our website. Can you see that, Peter?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
All right, cool. So kind of our normal process is, we're a hybrid store, so we're selling conventional, local, natural, specialty. So we get a very large volume of requests to consider for products all across the board. So we developed this sort of portal on our website and just collect some very basic information. We're a multi-store co-op, so we have a team of buyers who work out of our resource center, our administrative office, and we have a buyer for produce and floral. We have a buyer for grocery and bulk foods, two for grocery actually, and they're responsible for product selection and sourcing for all of our store locations. So kind of a centralized system. So this is what kind of the form looks like. So normally someone who's interested in having the co-op carry their products, they would come in here, they would fill this out, the product description, pretty easy stuff. Some information here, ingredient list, distributor or broker information, wholesale price list, and then any other, point of sale material or pamphlets that they might have. We ask for an organic certificate, but we usually take someone's word for it if they're USDA certified. This is usually maybe like a produce or a meat item, and then information on how to ship samples to our offices or where they can be dropped off. And then so once we get that, we look at that. One of the things that we face with a lot of product requests coming in is category saturation. So any category, be it apples or beef or non-perishable, canned beans, face lotion, anything like that, any category is subject to saturation, or we just have too many of the same thing. And that's usually the reason why we we don't bring a product in. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but that's one of our primary concerns, is that product saturation. So our buyers, look, we talk with the vendor who is like us to be considered. We talk about pricing. We look at what our margins need to be, what the potential retail pricing would be for that product or those products. We also work with very closely with our department managers in each of our locations. It's a real kind of team approach. They're right on the front lines with our customers, so they know what customers are looking for. And I'm going to stop sharing this. So it's really kind of a team decision a lot of times as far as what new products we're going to bring in. And then once we made a decision to bring them in, there's a pretty easy approval process. We send through some paperwork, W-9, internal sheet for our accounts payable and our finance department. And then we add the items to our system and we're good to go. And then the buyer who made that decision is responsible for vendor relationships overall. But we ask that our department managers and operations teams in the stores are kind of maintaining that day-to-day relationship once we're working together. So that's what it looks like in a normal process.
Great, Jacob. And I'm just wondering if you could talk if there's anything that you're doing differently these days. And then as a follow-up, have there been any, I think we've heard about a couple of product lines at least that you've been able to take on a more rapid basis. So if you could just explain a little bit how you've been approaching things under the current situation and a couple of examples of where you've had success bringing some folks in.
Sure. So our process is still fairly normal. It's really a matter of just kind of speeding up the process. So normally if we would, submit some paperwork to our accounts payable department, it could take a couple of weeks depending on their workload. But now, and similar to working through our, getting products into our database, we have a team of a few people who enter product information into our database for our POS and receiving systems. And, normally there can be a 1 to 2 week turnaround time on getting new products in, just because the volume of work is so high. And what we've found is we've really just had to, in different areas, refocus our priorities. So, sales promotions, for instance, are usually a very high priority to get those going and work through. And that's not what customers are looking for right now. Customers just need their basic items. So it's really a matter of just kind of shifting priorities. So if, for instance, if we can't get eggs and we find a source for eggs and we need to get a new process through AP, we walk downstairs to their office, say, hey, I need this in, today, and they'll do it. So it's really just a matter of understanding and working together internally for us what the priorities are. So not really many complicated changes, just sort of changes in priorities and really understanding what the needs are based on what the voids are in the market, or what opportunities we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then just have you had the opportunity to, I understand that there's a couple products you've been able to source recently that have been going through the Sodexo supply chain to some of the institutions that you've been able to bring in-house. Just if you're able to comment on any of those, that would be great.
Yep, I can mention two. One is Maple Meadow Eggs. We're an egg producer, I believe in the Barrie, and they were selling primarily to institutions, and they were selling through Black River Produce, which is one of our current primary distributors, and became aware that they had a lot of product, and eggs was one of the things that some of our normal suppliers, AG New England, for the conventional eggs, Pete and Jerry's for the organic and natural, we're getting hit pretty hard with all the panic buying, and product just was not as available as it usually is. They were not able to keep up with production to meet that demand. So the Maple Meadow ended up being a really nice fill-in. Again, we already had a relationship with Black River. Our buyer got on the phone with Maple Meadow just to learn a little bit more about their eggs, talk about pricing, and within a day or so, we were able to turn that around and get product into the stores. And it was really fast. And I feel like we're compared to a Hannaford or a Price Chopper. We're really able to be more nimble in kind of diversifying our distribution and getting products where we can in an emergency like this. Another example, and again through Black River Produce, that came from the Sodexo thing, was Ceres Greens, CERES, and also a Vermont company, and they were selling bulk greens again to institutions. And they took a step before they came to Sodexo and started packaging up their greens in retail packs. And that was a very, very smart move on their part to be ready for a different market that they're not used to. So we spoke with them and Black River, and again, just in a couple of days, we were able to turn that around and get those into the stores. And that was helpful as well. Olivia's and Fresh Express, kind of the national brands of packaged salad greens. That's an item line that's been very, very popular since this COVID-19 thing hit. People are looking for what they perceive to be safe food. So packaged was, rather than open greens sitting out in the case, were what customers have been looking for. So this was a nice fill-in when we were in short supply on the others. And kind of neat too, I was talking with my produce buyer after she spoke with the folks at Ceres, and they could potentially be, once the institutions open up again, they're probably going to be providing to their usual customers, and we may not have that need, and they may not need to sell to us. However, we may have sourced some local loose basil that we normally wouldn't have in the off season. They're hydroponics, so they can provide in the winter as well. We have a local basil grower we're committed to in the summer, but this may be a long-term thing as well.
That's great.
Which is kind of neat. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing both the sort of process as well as some of those recent examples. I'm just curious if there's any questions that folks have of Jacob as a buyer in a retail environment based on your own experiences. You can unmute yourself and chime in or put it in the chat, either way. One question I had is, so you mentioned that some of these may become longer term. If there's any sort of specific, is there any other sort of specific suggestions you would have to folks who are trying to explore relationships with the retail, whether it's the smaller entities or the bigger chains? I think your sign-on sheets are a useful indication of the kind of questions you're going to have. But are there any other sort of particular relationship tips or strategies that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think a couple. One is to really think about wholesale distribution. Most retailers work primarily with distributors. We have between 300 and 400 active vendors in our stores, and that's a lot. And the advantage to selling direct, obviously, is that you have control over what you're making on the product. You have control over delivery. You have somewhat control over what stores you're going into, who's seeing your product. And as a producer, I especially where this is kind of will be your life and blood, I can see how that would be really, really important. And going into distribution would be scary. But distribution it's important. I mean, we have a lot of good partnerships with distributors, and larger distributors such as UNFI, probably not really recommended if you're just getting off your feet as a grower or producer of a product. can be a little tough to deal with, but smaller distributors, associated buyers, in Barrington, New Hampshire, Black River Produce, Upper Valley Produce. I'm just trying to think of some others. We have really good kind of long-standing relationships with these folks, and we're a very important customer for them. So we actually will often work with, if someone approaches us and would like to sell their product, we will often work with them and the distributor kind of as a go-between to kind of get them connected. And the advantages for us as a retailer with working with a distributor is you're getting multiple brands, multiple products under one bill. It's really kind of the administrative weight there, as well as receiving, dealing with the paperwork. It's a lot of invoices coming through our door. It's a good way to expedite payment as well. We keep up with that as well as we can. So distribution is just a way to kind of streamline. And so that's one. I said there were two. What was the other distribution? Oh, so another kind of piece of advice as well is, if you're thinking about selling at retail rather than, or in addition to institutional, is to think like a consumer. So how is this product going to look and interact with someone when it's on the shelf in a grocery store? That's really important to think about. And we're a little less sensitive to that at the moment because we're in crisis mode. So for instance, Cabot is selling to us their 1 pound butter blocks because their institutional customers have kind of dried up. That is definitely not a retail friendly product. It's a pound of butter wrapped in plastic with a UPC sticker stuck on it.
Right.
But normally, and even now, preferably, you want to think about yourself as a consumer. What do you look at when you look at a product on the shelf, and what makes you buy it? Packaging is so important. And then other things as well. I mean, just to make it easier for and more practical for the retailer is, making sure you have a UPC, the product is well labeled. How are you selling? Are you selling it by the each? Are you selling it in a case? Kind of what I think is common sense stuff. But
right.
Myself and our team of buyers are more than happy to work with folks too who are kind of developing a retail market. I often tell the story of we saw a locally made candy product, and the woman came to me who makes the product several years ago before I was in my current position, and I was the buyer for the candy category, which was a very difficult job, as you can imagine, and a little sarcasm there.
Yeah.
And she said, I really want to sell my product. This is what it looks like now. What do you think? And I gave her some advice on packaging, on this kind of shelf presence, what our customers thought, showed her some examples of products that we had that had done well. And over that next couple of years, we met 2 or 3 times, and throughout those couple of years, she sourced better packaging. She really streamlined what the product looked like, and at the end, had an extremely beautiful product that's done really well in our stores, but it's done well in other places as well. So we kind of helped her grow her business, even though it benefited other retailers.
That's great. Jacob, I really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a extremely busy day. If we have other questions that come up later, maybe we can channel them to you and Alan, and we can provide some feedback. But just want to say thanks so much for joining us, and certainly feel free to stay on. But if you need to head off, that's okay as well.
Sure. And I will share my I'll share my email address in the chat window.
Excellent.
So anyone on the call can feel free to reach out to me and ask any clarifying questions or additional questions that I didn't cover.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
So I just want to turn now to one other person who really want to give an opportunity to talk, and that's Hillary Wallentuck, who's one of the nutrition specialists for the New England Dairy and Food Council. And as we all know, this has been a really challenging 5 years or so for the dairy industry in New England due to oversupply and the low prices. And then now with the additional disruption in the institutional supply chain. Hillary, I'm just wondering if you'd share a little bit about what you're hearing from the dairies, particular issues, questions for the group. But would love to give you an opportunity to just share with us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So during this difficult time, there is a steady and reliable supply of milk coming from farms in our region. And I'm sure you've all seen the grocery shelves, the dairy case, whether it's empty, the panic buying. And although milk sales and demand has increased in retail, our dairy farmers are really suffering the brunt of the food service closures, restaurants and schools, and halts in exports. 50% of milk and 60% of butter and cheese nationally goes to food service. So New England Dairy, we're working with partners such as yourselves and other industry folks to ensure to try to ensure that milk and dairy are accessible to those who would like them. Some challenges and issues that we're working on, schools, they have whole new operating models and working to ensure that dairy makes it out with these meals. Dairy farmers in New England have provided 1,300 totes and 4,000 ice packs, 76 districts in New England. So this is about $50,000 from our local dairy farmers going to schools to ensure that students take home milk. But we are looking for external funding to support some larger requests. There's only so much that we can support, but we are hearing from departments of education that schools are having challenges storing and distributing milk, and we anticipate that we'll hear more issues related to storage and safe transportation as the weather gets warmer. So that's something I would love the group to brainstorm thoughts about storage for these K through 12 schools. And then just quickly, some of the other realms that we're working in, we all see the excess milk on the market, and we're working with processors and food banks to get that excess milk into the hands of those who need it. I know you've heard of milk being dumped, and most people, milk is one of the most requested items at food banks. And so it's a big issue, and we're really working to try to make connections for donated product with food banks and understanding their capacity for, milk is a fresh perishable product for these donations. So we're communicating with processors, large and small, to make them aware of the USDA milk donation reimbursement program, taking this excess milk on the market, processing and donating it. What does that look like? But we imagine, then if that's successful, food pantries are going to also suffer from storage shortages. So that's another area of consideration. And then, going back to the retail, again, this fruitful, but milk supply, but we are seeing some purchasing limits on milk and select dairy products. So just lots going on in the industry right now.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, what are you folks hearing, those of you working with schools or with food banks or other hunger relief organizations, in terms of getting a dish, getting milk in a form that can be sent home with the kids for school, or any either challenges or successes with the food banks in your regions? You can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to jump in, if you have something to add there. I know those of you who are the farm to school leads, are you hearing any particular challenges with storage at this point, or are the schools essentially taking them in, taking the cartons in the way they had been in the past, and then packing them out with the take-home meals?
Hey, Peter, this is Helen from Vermont, Helen Roadfett from
Hey,
NOFA.
Helen.
I'm not sure what the scene is like in other states, but here in Vermont, people are already starting to worry about what happens when the weather gets warmer. And given that schools are closed to the end of the year, how are they, in all of the various forms they're distributing meals, including milk? Is it via on the bus route or pickup spots around the community? They're really just worried about proper food storage, and in particular keeping the milk cold as the weather warms. So they're being creative with coolers and freezing Ziploc bags full of ice and things like that, but also looking for some more ideas and some more infrastructure. And there's a number of schools also that have started to take advantage of some flexibility to send home bulk milk, so they can send home half-gallon or gallon sizes as long as it's equivalent to the number of meals that they're serving. So schools that are sending home multiple days worth of meals at a time are able to use those, and they found that a little bit easier in terms of transport and packing and time. So that's been helpful. I'm not sure if other people are seeing that in other states around the region, but.
Did there need to be any kind of specific waiver to allow that to happen, or is that just something that?
Yeah, there is a waiver. I'm actually looking up right now if it's one that's specific that Vermont requested and got, or if it's one of the nationwide waivers. So if you give me a second, or if someone else knows off the top of their head, jump in, but I'm happy to just look it up real quick to confirm.
And Hillary, do you guys have resources that you've put out in terms of how to deal in some of the situations that Helen's identified?
Yeah, so on our website, New England Dairy, there are resources and ways that we can help, such possible grant funding, additional resources or partners we can lead you to. So again, we are continuing to try and fulfill requests as they come in. And again, looking for external funding for some of the larger requests, but please, I'll put my email in the chat as well as our website. So just reach out with any questions or requests.
That's great. Thanks, Hillary.
You're welcome.
Any other either questions or offerings related to the dairy situation in the region right now? I know this may be a topic that we want to explore more deeply after some other fact finding later on. But feel free to chime in now if there's anything specific folks want to call out.
So this is Allie from Maine, Department of Ag Conservation and Forestry, and I am not speaking for the department, but from what I've heard from schools and also corrections, that the availability of cartons has changed, so that sort of changed what corrections is able to get, although it's been a few weeks since I've talked to them about that. In schools, they were having issues with shortages, I guess, with milk, but they are now sending mostly quarts and gallon containers home right now. So that situation has kind of resolved itself. And anecdotally, our direct milk sales are doing really well.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Well, I want to make sure there's time for other folks to put out other questions or share successes that you've had in your areas. And I know we have folks from a number of states as well as New England, and so we certainly welcome your comments as well. Hillary, thanks again for the update, and we'll definitely be staying in touch about other things, other ways that we can help bridge those connections that maybe are not working as well right now. So Issa Foster, I know you just posted some information in the chat. If you'd just like to speak to it real briefly, summarize that would be great.
Definitely. Thank you, Peter. And it's great to meet everybody. I'm from Connecticut, but I went to Stanford and I'm working with a group of students and researchers there on a SNAP Action Coalition. And basically we've been working with policymakers, Hunger Free America, Earthring's cousin, the former director of the World Food Program, to try to help push some policy legislation with regards to SNAP and being able to purchase and use food stamps online. Right now, the USDA and states are trying to push for online purchasing in all 50 states, and state by state, certain states are being approved. But we're also trying to see what is the interest of local food providers, because right now, only 8 retailers, such as like Amazon and Walmart, are currently accepting SNAP online, and we're trying to see how this could be a potential opportunity to support local food producers, farmers, etc. So we've created this survey. It takes about 5 minutes, and we're just trying to make a database to really provide to policymakers to really show interest. So it would be really, really helpful if applicable, if you're a local food producer or provider, if you might be able to complete it and or share with your networks. We'd really appreciate it, and happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Peter, can I just ask a follow-up question on that topic?
Sure.
Great. Are you seeing any movement in with USDA allowing for more retailers to come on board? At the Hanover Co-op, we are a large double up food bucks retailer and SNAP retailer in New England and New York, but it seems like they are waiting for states to make requests to be part of the pilot project. We are instituting online purchasing and curbside pickup. And so we're trying to incorporate the requirements for online SNAP payments. Are you seeing some real movement behind the scenes for other states like New Hampshire and Vermont to say, yeah, we want to be part of this? I see the need. Are you seeing movement at the state level?
Definitely. There's a lot more states that have been signing on, and they're actually, policymakers are trying to push for automatic all 50 states, because as you mentioned, it's state by state now, and they're trying to make it so it's automatically all 50 states. So a lot of states are being onboarded now.
I may follow up with you after the call.
Please do. Please do.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. I know we have some folks who have been involved in the hunger relief efforts as well. And I'm curious, we've been hearing some conversations about the desire to take more fresh product from the region and interest in making those connections. I'm just kind of curious if any of you have had successes you wanted to share, or particular challenges that you're facing right now in terms of making new connections with some of the food that's available that had been going to the institutions. I know we have a few other things here in the chat. So if Hannah or Tanya, if you have any that you want to share as well, feel free to jump in.
Well, we have Diane, who didn't have her microphone working, from Illinois Farm to School, who was saying that at their site they have sort of a mixed approach when it comes to milk distribution, and also has concerns about the warmer weather. And so I know I've been hearing a few potential solutions to the food storage issue as the weather warms up, thinking about different kinds of storage options. And I'm wondering if there's anyone on the call that might want to speak to that from their perspective.
Some of the similar issues that Hillary brought up.
Yeah, some things I've heard about are trying to plan in advance for that, thinking about coolers, purchasing coolers, trying to find funding for that as an option, potentially collaborating with either nearby institutions or other folks who might have cold storage options that they might be able to partner with. So those are just a few things that we've been hearing a little bit about. And I wish I could think of some of the specifics right now, but if there's anyone on the call that that has info on that, I'd love to hear about it.
Great. And Hannah, you started off with sort of talking about looking at the big picture of the supply chain and the disruptions right now. And as we, we're thinking about that, we're thinking about some of the sort of bigger questions about connections and collaborations and opportunities, so that could feed into more strategic matchmaking. Is there anything you want to add there, or way to frame some of those questions?
Yeah, I mean, we can hear from folks on the call, or if anybody wants to reach out to me directly afterwards, I'll put my email in the chat. But I think we're really interested in identifying partners in each state to help facilitate matchmaking of product that was meant to originally go to institutions. And so if anybody on this call, or you work for an organization or have recommendations across New England for those that are representing both the production end, like those with the surplus that needs to find a market, or those representing organizations in retail or food rescue, or even direct to consumer outlets and technical assistance for that, then we'd love to have a conversation about what kind of collaboration we could have. I put this question in the chat, but just on the topic of retail, I've been thinking a lot about as producers who were previously selling wholesale to institutions are shifting to retail and direct to consumer, and hearing what a process that can be in terms of changing packaging or pack size, that like what will the impact be on institutional procurement if in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, when we're asking producers to switch back to wholesale, what will that look like? So I'd welcome thoughts on either of those things.
My name is Ashley Muskrat. I'd be happy to jump in if that's okay.
Great.
Great.
I am here representing the Center for Ecotechnology. We're an environmental nonprofit in Northampton, Massachusetts. And we administer the Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, which is sponsored by the Mass DEP. And we kind of do exactly what Hannah just described. We play a role of matchmaker, helping food and really under normal circumstances, other materials find appropriate, highest value outlets. So I'll put the link to our hotline and website in the chat box, but would be thrilled to hear from anyone who is in need of an outlet for a product, or from anyone who's looking for something that we may be able to help find. And then outside of Massachusetts, we run a similar program called Wasted Food Solutions. And we are very active across New England, have a pretty good sense of the food rescue and food service landscape. So if you're outside of Massachusetts, also, but in the New England area, don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions. So I'll put both links, Recycling Works in MA and Wasted Food Solutions, in the chat box, and would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Ashley. And I should have mentioned that CET is one of the organizations that we have that sort of spurred this conversation of collaborating with entities, because Ashley's colleague had reached out to us, and we attended a call last week with several food rescue organizations in Massachusetts. And that's one of the kind of coalitions that I was referencing before, of all these organizations that are trying to work together to figure out how to move product around. So that's exactly the kind of partnership that we're looking for. And I think if the spreadsheet can serve as some kind of like shared database, so that these conversations can be grounded somewhere, then like we would love to offer that as a tool that anybody can use, and to help facilitate those conversations, to maybe take some of the burden of managing matchmaking off of entities like CET.
That's great. A couple other things that we had come up in the registration that folks submitted when we had you register for the webinar were thoughts from folks in the college sector about what your plans are, contingency plans, given uncertainty about opening date in the fall. I know there's an article in the Globe today that talked about how some of the colleges are in New England are starting to build in a couple of different scenarios for opening with full enrollment as well as other alternatives. So if there's any of you from the college sector that want to chime in with your thoughts there, feel free. Also, feel free to put it in the chat or to speak to additional forum topics. As we move forward, we're thinking that we're going to focus much more specifically on narrower topics and to try and dive deeper into some of these issues that are coming up and to do some additional brainstorming. So if you have thoughts on forums that you'd like to hear organized, we're more than interested in hearing that from you all. Joe, I see that you from Forrester have talked about one of the strategies the Boston area Gleaners is pursuing about helping ensure that payments to farmers make it and that they're not just taking a loss for everything. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I thought I'd just introduce it here. We are part of a larger group of people who are just thinking about what are the critical pieces that are needed in terms of a foundation for producers to support maintaining production levels. Part of it, we think, is about better forward contracting, better forward agreements to increase visibility and sort of the foundation of demand. Part of it is increasing the agility of the supply chain itself to move from channel to channel. But the other part of it is definitely plan Bs, if you will. And one of those that was brought to us from others is the gleaning organizations, that some of them have gone through the ReFed accelerator as an example. And what they have been coached to do is develop revenue models where a small percentage of what they take out of the field is sold in through retail channels at a marginal discount. So it's kind of a win-win in that the farmer gets paid more than they would. There's an opportunity for the retailer to get a slightly better deal on local food. And of course, it increases the sustainability and viability of the gleaning model as well. So it's not, it's not a fit for 20% of crop. It's not a fit for 30% of it, but it might be a fit for 5 to 10% of it, particularly in a Plan B scenario, which is what we're trying to work on. So I just wanted to share that it's something that's growing pretty quickly.
Great, appreciate that. And appreciate the resources and other information that people are putting in the chat. Again, we'll be capturing the chat, including it with the notes and the recording and posting that up on our website at the conclusion. Sort of scrolling through there. We're coming to the top of the hour, so just also want to last invitation if folks have had any burning successes or things that are not even burning, but good successes, things that are somewhat positive in these time, feel free to share that. One of the things that I know the Farm to School Network in New England and FINE have teamed up on is a hashtag for communities feeding kids, sort of success stories on Instagram. So we've been getting a little bit of traction there. We can put that that hashtag in the notes so you can follow along or add any successes that you've seen. We'll be compiling those at the end and sort of making them available on the New England Farm to School Collaborative and FINE's website as well. And once again, just want to make sure we're keeping the lines of communication open. We'll be taking your thoughts and thinking about the upcoming forum series. We're doing some invitation only for example, the college sector, dining sector in the near future, and more than happy to partner with other groups on similar types of forums as the opportunity arises. So not hearing additional thoughts, I want to bequeath you all with 4 minutes of time back in your day. We'll follow up, as I said, with the notes, recording, the chat, and please do keep in contact with ideas, stories, successes, challenges, thoughts for other forums or ways that we can help out. And good luck. Appreciate everything that everyone is doing in this really challenging time. It's impressive to see the level of engagement these days. So stay healthy and stay in touch.